The sun was still low over the training compound when Cadet Henry Marsh first saw her walk across the parade ground. The compound was awake but groggy. The smell of early morning dew mixed with boot polish lingered in the air. Instructors barked orders from across the field. Cadets rushed to form their rows. But something shifted, a ripple across the courtyard, as she stepped through the main gate with a calm confidence that made everyone around her straighten their posture. Her name was Ava Rylan. Most cadets had never heard it before. Those who had knew only rumors. A transfer from an elite joint program. A soldier who had seen real missions even before selection. A woman who had returned from more operations than some instructors. But she carried none of that in her expression. She looked as quiet as drifting smoke and as unreadable as a sealed dossier. Henry elbowed his friend Cadet Jonah Price and whispered that she did not look like much. Jonah smirked and agreed. The two had been part of the top sparring squad for months. They had built reputations on strength and aggression. Their confidence often drifted into arrogance and even instructors struggled to contain them. They knew sparring day was coming soon, the day where every new cadet had to step into the ring. They were sure they would teach her a lesson. Soon more cadets began whispering and nudging each other while watching Ava go to registration. The whispers grew into bets. Some said she was overrated. Others said she was untouchable. Henry simply grinned and waited for the chance to find out for himself. During the morning drills, Ava stayed mostly silent. She followed formation without hesitation. She completed obstacle courses with focus so sharp it almost looked emotionless. She did not show off. She did not ask for attention. But she also did not hide her capabilities. When cadets struggled with rope climbs, she helped one without making it seem like help. When an instructor tested her endurance, she held the posture longer than required. Jonah grew annoyed. Henry grew impatient. They wanted to see what she was really made of. After lunch came the moment the entire platoon had waited for. Sparring evaluation. Everyone circled around the training mats set under a canopy. Instructors stood at the edges. The rule was simple. Cadets spar lightly to show control. No full aggression. No intent to injure. But as everyone knew, lightly sometimes turned into ego and ego often turned into mistakes. The instructor began calling names in pairs. One by one cadets entered the ring. Some matches lasted minutes. Some ended in seconds. Henry and Jonah whispered loudly to each other every time Ava's name was not called. They wanted her in the ring. They wanted to break the calmness she carried. Most importantly, they wanted to prove that she did not belong above them in any ranking. Then the instructor paused and called Cadet Ava Rylan. A low ripple of sound ran through the crowd. Henry stood up taller. Jonah folded his arms. The instructor needed a partner for her. Before he could choose, Henry stepped forward and volunteered. Jonah laughed and stepped forward as well. But instructors did not allow two cadets to challenge one person. Jonah stepped back, but his grin stayed mocking. Henry walked into the ring feeling confident. Ava stepped in with the same calm expression she had worn all day. The instructor said begin. Henry rushed in with a fast jab meant to test her reflexes. But she seemed to disappear. Not by moving far, just by shifting slightly. His punch caught only empty air. Before he could reset, she tapped his shoulder lightly. A warning shot. He swung again harder. She slipped past with a pivot so smooth it looked like she was gliding. Another tap. Another warning. A murmur spread through the watching cadets. Henry grew irritated. His pride tightened his muscles. He lunged with a stronger combination, trying to force her into defense. But she stepped aside and redirected his arm with such subtle technique that he stumbled forward. She did not even strike back. She simply let his momentum defeat him. Henry panted, growing red with frustration. Then he made a bigger mistake. He attacked without control. It drove the instructor to shout at him, but he ignored it. That was when Ava moved not fast but efficiently. She parried one strike, took his balance and gently placed him flat on the mat before he understood what happened. It all took 3 seconds. Henry blinked up at the canopy, unable to process the speed. The instructor called match complete, but Jonah was already stepping forward. The instructor tried to stop him, but Jonah insisted that he wanted his turn. The instructor sighed and allowed it, but warned Jonah to remember control. Jonah cracked his knuckles and stepped in face hard with determination. Ava breathed out slowly. Jonah attacked first with speed. He was faster than Henry and more technical. But she read his movements like a book she had already memorized. She dodged. She redirected. When Jonah pivoted for a kick, she swept his support leg and he hit the ground hard. The crowd gasped. Jonah leapt up embarrassed and charged again. She sidestepped and locked his arm before releasing him. He tried a final desperate tackle, but she simply redirected his weight and placed him on the mat again. 12 seconds. That was all it took for 2 of the strongest cadets in the platoon to find themselves unable to stand long enough to continue. Silence filled the training area. Some cadets looked stunned. Others looked inspired. The instructors exchanged glances of approval. Henry and Jonah lay catching their breath, humiliated but awakening to a deeper lesson. Ava stepped back politely and told the instructor she was done. She did not smile. She did not boast. She simply offered a hand to both Henry and Jonah, helping them up from the mat. The gesture struck the crowd more powerfully than the sparring itself. She respected them even after they had tried to embarrass her. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, the 3 of them found themselves at the water station. Henry approached her quietly. He admitted he had underestimated her. Jonah apologized too, though his tone was still stubborn. Ava simply said that strength was not measured by noise but by clarity and timing. She then walked off, leaving the 2 cadets looking at each other more thoughtful than before. Instructors later revealed more about her background. She had been part of a classified joint task program that trained soldiers for emergency extraction missions in unstable regions. She had once rescued a trapped unit by crawling through narrow tunnels. She had carried a wounded teammate for nearly 2 miles under fire. She had learned discipline through hardship and silence rather than glory. None of that was obvious when she entered the compound. And none of it was needed to earn respect. What earned respect was what everyone had witnessed that day: her control, her restraint, her calm power, and her humility. As the weeks went on, Henry and Jonah began training with her regularly. She corrected their mistakes without judgment. She taught them balance, timing, and patience. She helped them understand that power without discipline collapses. She also opened up slowly about her past, but never fully. She believed every soldier carried private memories that shaped them, and the details did not define them. What mattered was who they became. Months later, during final evaluation, the instructors asked for volunteers for a rescue simulation that was known to break even the strongest cadets. Henry volunteered. Jonah volunteered. Ava stepped forward quietly. The mission required crawling through cold water, navigating blind corridors, scaling unstable platforms, and carrying heavy loads while under simulated pressure. The 3 worked together seamlessly. At one point Jonah slipped on a wet platform and nearly fell from a height. Ava grabbed his arm and pulled him back using technique rather than brute force. Henry struggled with the weight of the rescue dummy they had to carry. Ava lifted with him, balancing the load without taking credit. Their teamwork flowed naturally. They completed the simulation faster than any other group that year. When the graduation ceremony came, Ava stood in the second row away from attention. She did not crave applause, but she received it anyway. Instructors honored her not only for skill but for leadership through humility. Henry and Jonah received commendations for most improved team performance. They knew the improvement came from one person who had changed their perspective entirely. After the ceremony, Henry asked Ava why she never boasted about defeating them. She answered quietly that defeating someone is easy, but helping them rise is harder and far more meaningful. Jonah, who once mocked her, now nodded with genuine respect. The three shook hands for the last time before being assigned to different units. Years later their paths crossed again during a joint operation briefing. Henry was now a squad leader, Jonah a field instructor, and Ava a mission specialist. When they met, they shared a smile filled with memories of that morning under the training canopy when two proud cadets learned a lesson they would never forget. A lesson delivered in 12 seconds from someone far stronger than their expectations. A lesson that shaped not just their careers but their character. And as they walked into the briefing room together, the younger cadets whispered about them just like they once whispered about her. Quietly, Henry turned to Jonah and said that he hoped the new cadets understood the truth they once missed. Strength is not loud. Strength does not seek an audience. Real strength stands calm in the center of a storm and lets its actions do the speaking. And the story of that sparring match lived on in the training compound. Not as a tale of humiliation but as a legend of respect, humility, discipline, and the moment two cadets learned that greatness does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in quietly. Sometimes it stands still. Sometimes it simply taps you on the shoulder and leaves you breathless on the mat before you even understand what happened.